Hello, this is the audio recording of Black Cat Rant Scarf, where I rant about pretty much anything I want, although I think it's mostly based in writing. I also have another Tumblr called blackcatbluescarf.tumblr.com, and you can visit that if you like. This rant was written on December 2nd, 2011, and the topic is Amy Iddur. She is an original character of Darling, the book that I am currently working on. Amy Iddur grew up in a town without a name. It's so insignificant, it had to borrow the name of the town that actually existed nearby, causing a lot of grief as to where exactly she lived, and if her address meant anything. As plain as a sea of grass, Amy hardly stood out. Brown curly hair, a little short, a little overweight, speckled and freckled skin. If anything can be said about Amy, is that she is an extremely ordinary girl. Her looks didn't win her any popularity contest, and her naivete squarely set her as a prime target at school. Every name you could give to a human being, Amy suffered through, but she dealt with everyone exceptionally well. Her friends lacked any kind of backbone, and the group she was with would tolerate the verbal and physical beatings they received daily. She was the kind of girl that couldn't be put down. That is, until Darling came along and put a stop to all that. The second eldest of five, Amy had a large family. The first to get into college, as her elder brother couldn't move on from the fact that his family was unbelievably poor. He was a bad kid, endlessly getting into trouble, probably because he knew that his family inherited debt from their still living grandparents, and also knew the truth that his folks' inability to make bank would lead to a simple recourse that would all fall upon him someday. A few cases of Bud and a rusty F-150 led to Amy finding herself wearing a black dress and crying tears in front of a wooden box out in her own backyard. Her mother worried for her. A poor girl like that can only take so much abuse before she's going to break. Amy continued on regardless, and after a short grieving period, moved on with her life with very little afterthought. She had responsibilities and other concerns, ones that took priority over a $100,000 debt that no one could pay back, ones that didn't involve insults and belittlement at school, but rather ones that involved taking the 15-mile walk down to the social center where she could care for sick and elderly. You could call it a volunteer service. Amy called it a hobby. Hobby or not, she would need to make a living, so Amy stopped her social center visits and endured an hour-lengthy walk to do her work around a rundown Dunkin' Donuts, where for 2 years she made sandwiches behind the counter. Darling drove her there for her second year, giving her feet a needed break from the 5 to 8 hour shifts she would work through. Through her careful saving, she got herself into college with the help of minimal financial aid. Quickly proving her talents and experiences invaluable, she spent her free time down at the hospital as an intern. Although Amy loved her social work, her deep passion could be found in books. Her beloved cassette player and its 5 tapes were bought at a garage sale at a dime piece were no comparison to books she would read. Books were her only way to reach the outside world. With the same trek to the social center, Amy would also reach the public library, and her tired library card always came along with her. One transfer of books to her backpack later, and she was ready to lug them back for the return trip. It was argued before that Amy had to read the entire library and had to ask librarians for special order books for her to read, but anyone that knew Amy would know that she would never ask for anything like that. Besides, when high school came around, she had a new opportunity to find stories. It could be said that Darling was the worst and best thing that happened to Amy. She was bright and beautiful, ambitious and sporadic. Darling was a stellar contrast to Amy's unique brand of blandness. Darling loved to write, and Amy loved to read, so on the fateful day that Darling stood up for Amy's little group of friends, that she had become acquainted with who the other students referred to as the insane dragon writer. The two became fast friends, and they shared everything with each other, leading Amy to eventually ditch her group and spend time only with her. Darling would write her books, and Amy would read them down, devouring each one as Darling showed them to her. Amy loved everyone, finding them all fascinating and wonderful, much to the pleasure of Darling's ego. Along with the books, Darling also had access to a car and other formalities that Amy never had, showing Amy that there was a whole world out there for her to explore. Because of this, Amy always is a shadow to Darling's massive, unstoppable ego, falling behind more as a servant rather than as her own person. A better alternative than the daily insults, but Amy never felt any reason to disturb the friendship and never called Darling out on it. Now that the two are both at the same college, Amy recognizes that her friend is losing herself to the world she creates, while she holds on to her own dream of becoming a nurse. It's a rare case for when Amy has to rein Darling in, and Amy hopes that her friend will wake up to the reality that she has been given, so she will avoid the fate that her older brother did. I like Amy as a character because she has her house in order. She's very much set in her ways, and those ways are good. Amy isn't a compilation of expected character types, and in any other case would be considered a non-character in those other stories. Her largest strength is her ability to resist and handle difficult and trying situations. Regardless of how hard things are, Amy is able to tough out anything. It's rare for a character to have such a thick skin because stories tend to lay on the angst, but like everything else about Amy, she simply goes without. Her final and most important strength is that while she's very much attached to Darling, she recognizes that reality is where she is and there's no escaping it, no matter how many fantasy books you read or write. Trying to live out those fantasies doesn't help either, and acting really strangely is a good way to receive ridicule, something she is intimately familiar with. I would have to say her big-time weakness is that she's incredibly bland. She has nothing special about her and is an incredibly realistic character. She has the incapacity to judge good or bad stories and encourages Darling's behavior, so she's not helping our protagonist out at all. Since she isn't the main focus of the story, which leads to her final weakness. She is almost literally a board for Darling to bounce off of. Amy was specifically made to reflect Darling off of her, and regardless of what I do to her, that won't change. Amy needs to be there as a contrast to the insane dragon rider, but I fear that she may be only seen as a tool and not a person. I think that with this backstory as a guide, I may have developed enough depth to her that she can be seen as a character who holds her own in Darling's story. That is my rant. Thank you for listening, and have a good day.